It was a crisp fall morning right around the middle of October. Jake loved to watch the elk roam around in front of his small log cabin house just as the sun was peeking over the mountain ranges. He snuck quietly down the stairs, careful not to wake his sleeping father, Sam. As Jake tiptoed to his favorite watch spot, a large window in the middle of their living room that overlooked the breathtaking mountains and miles of acres of land, he spotted a few elk roaming around behind his house. Jake loved all kinds of animals, but elk were certainly his favorite. Jake continued to watch the elk for around 10 minutes or so before walking over to the old TV in the living room. He turned it on and slid an old tape into the VCR. Jake loved watching old Western movies. He turned on his favorite John Wayne movie and sat down on the couch, waiting for his dad to wake up. Finally, Jake heard his dad wake up and walk down the creaking staircase into the living room. "Good morning, son," Sam said as he waltzed into the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee. "John Wayne again?" "You know it, Pa." Sam smiled as he went back to making his coffee. Jake turned around in his seat to look at his dad in the kitchen. "Pa, do we have a gun?" This question caught Sam completely by surprise, and he wasn't exactly sure how to answer it yet. "What was that, son?" "I said, do we have a gun, Pa?" "Well, why would you ask a question like that?" "Well, I always watch my John Wayne and Clint Eastwood movies, and they always use guns, and we have elk and deer heads on our walls, so I want to know if we have a gun." Sam, in fact, did have a gun. He actually had a few guns locked away in a safe in the log cabin house. Although Sam was not ready for the conversation he was about to have with Jake, he knew that Jake was growing up, and it was about time that Jake learned about gun safety. Sam went downstairs to the basement of the cabin and carefully typed in the code to his safe, where he retrieved a Glock 40. He brought it back upstairs and sat Jake down at the kitchen table. "Now, son, I first want to start off by saying this device is not a toy and should never be something to play or mess around with. Guns have a lot of good purposes, son, when used correctly. However, in the wrong hands, and when people don't use the gun correctly, it can be very deadly. This is why I want to educate you, son, about a gun and how it works, so that in the future you always know how to use one in case of an emergency or if we're just out on a hunting outing." Sam spent a little over an hour teaching Jake everything about the gun in front of them, including how to tell if a gun is loaded, how to properly unload a gun, and add or take away the magazine. Throughout Jake's childhood and into his teen years, Sam repeatedly would give routine lessons to his son about gun safety, even though Jake never really got into hunting. Years passed, but because of his father's constant teaching, Jake never forgot about gun safety. One morning, Jake was walking into his job as a bank teller. Jake had been running late that morning due to traffic, so he was not at his post before the customers started arriving. As Jake walked into the bank, he was quick to notice that the bank was being robbed, and the people inside were being held hostage until the robber received what he wanted. The robber had knocked the policeman unconscious and was collecting money from a bank teller at gunpoint. Jake, knowing how to properly operate and use a weapon similar to the one the police officers used, grabbed the gun off the floor that had been knocked out of the policeman's hands. While everyone in the bank laid on the ground, Jake slowly grabbed the gun and yelled at the robber to drop his weapon. Jake stood pointing the gun at the robber, and the robber, out of fear, dropped his weapon, and a fellow co-worker was able to retrieve the gun. Jake was then able to properly disarm the robber's weapon so that there was no fear of the gun going off and hurting anyone. The police and SWAT team showed up shortly after, and Jake was hailed as a hero for his brave acts of service.